The cafe was busy that morning, filled with the gentle hum of conversations, clinking cups, and the soft scrape of chairs on the wooden floor. Sunlight streamed through large windows, falling across the polished tables, making the small glass vases with single flowers shimmer. It was the kind of place where people came not just for coffee, but for a moment of calm, a place to pause from the rush of the day. The smell of fresh bread and brewed coffee mixed in the air, comforting anyone who stepped in. The waitress had been working there for years. She knew the rhythm of the cafe, the regular customers who greeted her by name, and the way the staff moved like a quiet orchestra, each person knowing their part. She carried herself with a natural confidence, moving with care and attention to ensure everyone felt welcome. Her smile was warm but genuine, never forced, and it was her way of making the cafe more than just a place to eat or drink. It was a place to feel at ease. That morning, the bell above the door jingled sharply, and she looked up from arranging cutlery on a table. In walked a woman whose presence seemed to command the room immediately. She was well-dressed, wearing a coat of deep green and a scarf of soft silk. Her jewelry glinted subtly in the sunlight, and her designer bag rested effortlessly on her arm. There was an air of confidence around her, but also something heavier, a sense of entitlement that made people instinctively step aside or lower their gaze. The waitress walked over with her usual polite greeting. "Good morning. Welcome. How many will be dining today?" she asked, her voice steady and calm, her eyes meeting the woman's with a professional warmth. The woman looked around, her gaze sharp, almost as if she were measuring every detail of the cafe, the staff, and the patrons. Then she replied, her tone slightly clipped, "Just one, but I expect this to be perfect." There was a subtle edge to her words, a hint that she was used to having her way, that anything less than perfect would not be acceptable. The waitress nodded politely, keeping her smile, and gestured toward a table by the window. "Right this way, please. This table has a good view of the street and receives plenty of sunlight." She walked ahead, pulling out the chair to signal the woman to sit. The woman barely acknowledged the gesture, dropping her bag on the chair with a soft thud and settling herself with a slight sigh, as if the effort of sitting gracefully was a task. Once seated, she looked around the table and then back at the waitress. "I hope the coffee is strong here, and it must be served hot. I do not like waiting." Her words were precise, deliberate, leaving no room for misunderstanding. It was clear she wanted control, wanted to set the tone of how her experience would go. The waitress nodded again, calm and unshaken. "Absolutely, your coffee will be prepared exactly as you like it. Can I offer you anything to start with while you look at the menu? Perhaps a small pastry?" She spoke as if offering a friendly suggestion, her tone inviting, giving the woman a choice without challenging her authority. The woman's lips pressed together in a faint, controlled smile. She lifted her eyes briefly to glance at the pastries under the glass dome on the counter. "A croissant. Make sure it is fresh," she added in a softer voice, but still carrying an air that suggested she expected no mistakes. As the waitress jotted down the order, she could feel the tension in the air, subtle but present. Not because of anything she had done, but because of the woman's demeanor, the way she seemed to assert her presence without raising her voice. The waitress had seen many people like this before, those who believed their wealth or status gave them a right to dominate others, but she knew that keeping calm, treating everyone with dignity, often spoke louder than any confrontation. While preparing the order, the waitress couldn't help noticing the glances of other diners. Some watched curiously, some with a subtle disapproval that mirrored her own private thoughts. It was a quiet drama unfolding, one that only those paying attention could see. The woman didn't speak much to others, but her attitude radiated loudly enough for anyone nearby to sense it. Yet, the waitress remained composed, a steady presence amidst the subtle tension. When the coffee and croissant were brought to the table, the woman barely looked at the tray, lifting her cup and taking a small sip. She frowned just slightly, her eyes narrowing. "This is not as hot as I expected," she said, her voice calm but firm. There was no shouting, but the words carried the weight of criticism that was impossible to ignore. The waitress leaned in slightly, her voice soft but confident. I apologize for that. I will have a fresh cup prepared for you right away. Piping hot. There was no hint of irritation in her tone, only a clear message that she would address the concern promptly. She returned to the counter, placing the cup aside and preparing a new one, careful to ensure it was exactly right. As she worked, the wealthy woman muttered something in German under her breath, assuming no one would understand. It was clearly meant as an insult, a comment on the waitress herself. Her words were sharp, meant to belittle, and the waitress caught just enough of it to feel the sting, though she could not respond immediately without drawing unnecessary attention. The other diners, hearing the foreign words but not understanding, exchanged small, curious glances. The air felt heavier in that corner of the cafe, tension threading through the otherwise calm morning. The waitress took a deep breath, centering herself. She had faced rudeness before, but this situation required not just patience, but careful thought. Reacting hastily would escalate the tension. Responding with poise could turn the situation in her favor. She brought the freshly prepared coffee back to the table, setting it down with a polite smile. "Here is your coffee, hot and freshly made," she said, her tone gentle yet firm, emphasizing the care she had taken. The croissant was placed neatly beside it. She stood for a moment, ensuring everything was satisfactory. The wealthy woman looked at the new cup, her frown slowly fading into a neutral expression. She took a sip, this time savoring it, and nodded once. The slight acknowledgement was small but significant. The waitress smiled politely, retreating to her station but keeping a watchful eye. The morning continued, filled with the quiet rhythm of the cafe. Patrons came and went, staff moved efficiently, and the sun rose higher, spilling light across the tables. Yet, the presence of the wealthy woman lingered, a quiet tension woven into the otherwise peaceful atmosphere. The waitress continued her work, calm and attentive, aware that the situation was not yet fully resolved but confident in her ability to handle it. It was clear that the morning would unfold into a test of patience, wit, and composure. The waitress knew that how she responded in the coming moments could define the encounter entirely. She had faced arrogance and insults before, but there was something about the quiet confidence of this woman that made the challenge more pointed. Still, the waitress trusted in her own poise, her own calmness, knowing that dignity often spoke louder than anger. As she moved between tables, checking on other guests and ensuring everything ran smoothly, she kept a mental note of the woman's subtle expressions, the sharp glance here, the slight smirk there. Each detail mattered, and each could provide insight into how to respond when the moment came. The morning passed in this delicate balance, a quiet tension under the hum of normalcy. The waitress remained steady, a calm center in a room where judgment and pride mingled invisibly. She knew the encounter had only just begun, and that the true test of her composure was still to come. The cafe had settled into its morning rhythm, the sound of conversations mingling with the gentle clatter of cups and the soft whir of the espresso machine. The sun had risen higher, casting long beams of light that danced across the polished wooden floors and warm-colored walls. Patrons chatted quietly at their tables, some reading newspapers, others on laptops, and a few enjoying the view of the street outside. The atmosphere was calm, almost serene, but in one corner, tension was quietly mounting. The wealthy woman sat at the window table, her posture straight and deliberate. She had finished the freshly prepared coffee, her frown replaced by a small, satisfied nod. For a moment, she appeared content, but there was an unmistakable edge in her gaze, a spark that suggested she was already finding fault with something. The waitress noticed this subtly, observing without interrupting, knowing that sometimes it was best to wait and understand the situation before responding. Then, in a low voice, the wealthy woman muttered something in German, assuming it would go unnoticed. Her words were sharp, precise, meant to belittle. The waitress had heard enough German in her life to catch the tone, even if she did not understand every word. The insult was aimed at her personally, a quiet attempt to embarrass her in front of the other patrons. The words were meant to sting, a subtle attack meant to undermine her confidence. The waitress felt a brief pang of hurt, a natural human reaction. It was never easy to be insulted, especially in a public space where others might notice. But she took a slow, measured breath, reminding herself that her response did not need to match the anger in the words. She had learned that patience and composure often held more power than any sharp retort. Around the cafe, a few diners glanced over curiously. The foreign words carried a sharpness that caught attention even if the meaning remained unclear. There was a quiet awareness in the room, a collective sensing of the tension at the window table. The wealthy woman, confident in her assumed anonymity, leaned back slightly, smirking. She believed her words had gone unnoticed and that she had successfully asserted control over the waitress. The subtle cruelty in her tone seemed, in her mind, like a demonstration of superiority. The waitress returned to her station, keeping her movements calm and purposeful. She carried a tray of drinks to another table, ensuring that the other patrons felt completely attended to. Her mind, however, remained aware of the situation at the window. She watched the wealthy woman from the corner of her eye, noting every gesture, every flicker of expression. It was a quiet observation, the kind that came from years of working in service, where reading people carefully could prevent escalation and maintain control. The wealthy woman, meanwhile, began to make her dissatisfaction known in subtler ways. She tapped her fingers lightly on the table, a soft but deliberate sound that drew attention. She adjusted her coat and scarf with exaggerated precision, sighing quietly but audibly. It was all calculated, small acts of frustration designed to unsettle the waitress and signal to anyone watching that she was accustomed to having authority. Each movement was a silent performance, a display of the power she assumed she held. The waitress, aware of these small provocations, chose not to react outwardly. She understood the effect they were meant to have and refused to grant the woman that satisfaction. Instead, she focused on her work, arranging tables neatly, ensuring that every cup and plate was in its proper place, and that other patrons were fully attended to. Her calmness was intentional, a silent counter to the tension building at the window table. The wealthy woman leaned forward slightly, resting her chin on her hand, and spoke again in German, louder this time. The words were clear, cutting, intended to humiliate. A couple of patrons glanced over, sensing the shift in tone, their curiosity growing. It was a subtle kind of drama, one that did not involve shouting or chaos, but the intensity of human emotion was unmistakable. The waitress felt the weight of the insult, but instead of reacting immediately, she allowed herself a moment of thought, planning a response that would be firm yet composed. She approached the table with quiet confidence, her steps measured and deliberate. The wealthy woman's eyes flicked up as she saw her, a faint smirk still playing on her lips, confident that she had successfully unsettled the waitress. But the waitress did not flinch, her calm demeanor radiating a quiet strength. She placed a small notebook on the table and spoke in a soft, steady voice. "I noticed your comment earlier," she said, choosing her words carefully. "I would appreciate it if we could maintain respect. I am here to ensure you have the best experience possible, and I will continue to do that professionally." Her tone was calm, yet it carried a firmness that could not be ignored. There was no anger, no hesitation, only clear acknowledgement of the situation and a subtle assertion of dignity. The wealthy woman's smirk faltered slightly, replaced by a flicker of surprise. She had expected submission, a nervous apology, or at least hesitation. Instead, she was met with composure and confidence, qualities that she had not anticipated. The cafe seemed to quiet in that moment, as if the air itself recognized the shift in power dynamics. Patrons watched subtly, some with admiration, others with surprise, all noting the unexpected turn in what had seemed a simple morning at the cafe. The waitress remained poised, giving the wealthy woman space to respond. Her calmness created a pause, a moment for reflection that emphasized the strength of her approach. It was a quiet confrontation, not loud or dramatic, but powerful in its simplicity. The wealthy woman, caught off guard, shifted slightly in her seat, the previous smugness replaced with a fleeting uncertainty. Around the cafe, the staff continued their work, though some glanced toward the window table with discreet attention. The other patrons sensed the tension but were unsure of the details, adding a layer of intrigue to the scene. The wealthy woman's attempt to assert dominance had been met not with confrontation, but with quiet authority, a subtle yet undeniable form of control. The waitress, aware of the eyes on them, kept her movements gentle and unobtrusive. She adjusted the position of the coffee cup, straightened the napkin, and ensured that everything appeared normal, even as the undercurrent of the encounter remained palpable. Her focus was on maintaining dignity, both for herself and for the experience of the cafe as a whole. She understood that her calmness was not just a personal choice, but a lesson in subtle influence, demonstrating that respect and composure could shift the tone of any interaction. The wealthy woman, feeling the unexpected resistance, leaned back once more. Her hands rested on the table, fingers lightly tapping, a subtle sign of her frustration. She had underestimated the quiet strength of the waitress, expecting compliance and intimidation to have the desired effect. Instead, she found herself facing a calm yet firm response, one that undermined her attempt to assert superiority. As the morning continued, the waitress moved about the cafe with steady confidence. Each gesture, each smile to a customer, reinforced the quiet strength she had displayed at the window table. The wealthy woman sipped her coffee, her expression gradually changing from annoyance to begrudging acceptance. It was a small victory for composure and patience, a reminder that confidence and calmness often spoke louder than arrogance or wealth. The encounter, though subtle, had shifted the energy of the cafe. Patrons continued their mornings, but there was a quiet awareness of the exchange at the window. The waitress had handled the insult with poise, demonstrating that dignity and calm could turn a potentially humiliating situation into a display of quiet power. The wealthy woman, though still seated, had lost some of the control she sought, her arrogance tempered by the unexpected composure of the waitress. By the time the tray was cleared and the morning moved toward its busy peak, the dynamic at the window table had changed. The wealthy woman no longer seemed as imposing, her earlier attempts to assert dominance fading into a subtle acknowledgement of the waitress's quiet authority. The cafe carried on, the clatter of cups and conversations filling the space, but the interaction remained a lingering memory, a testament to the power of calm, respectful strength in the face of arrogance. The cafe had settled into its usual rhythm, but the corner where the wealthy woman sat remained charged with a quiet tension. The other patrons, though engaged in their own conversations, could sense the subtle shift in the air. There was something different about the dynamic at the window table, an unspoken struggle playing out in calm but meaningful gestures. The wealthy woman had grown accustomed to people yielding to her presence. Her wealth, her appearance, and her confidence usually gave her an automatic edge, a sense that she could influence any situation with ease. But the waitress, with her poised calm and attentive presence, was proving to be different. She did not flinch, she did not show irritation, and she certainly did not allow herself to be intimidated. This quietly challenged the woman's sense of superiority, and it was clear she had not anticipated encountering such composed resistance. The waitress stood at a respectful distance for a moment, observing. Her eyes met the wealthy woman's briefly, and there was a subtle understanding in that glance. She would respond, but she would do so with care. There was power in words spoken softly, in the ability to assert boundaries without creating conflict. She approached the table slowly, ensuring that every movement conveyed confidence without aggression. Her approach alone seemed to shift the energy in the room. "Excuse me," the waitress said softly, her voice carrying a gentle authority. "I want to make sure we have a comfortable environment here. I understand there may have been some misunderstandings earlier. I'm happy to ensure your experience is exactly how you expect it, but I would also appreciate respect in our interactions." Her words were clear, firm, and calm. There was no anger, no attempt to humiliate in return, only an honest expression of expectation and professionalism. The wealthy woman's eyes widened slightly. She had not expected this. Typically, people either ignored her subtle insults, fumbled with their words, or attempted nervous apologies. But here, she was met with confidence that was gentle yet unyielding. There was a weight in the waitress's calmness that carried more authority than any loud protest could have. Patrons nearby glanced subtly, sensing the shift in control. The room remained quiet, but the tension was palpable, a silent drama unfolding. For a moment, the wealthy woman considered responding with another jab, perhaps in German again, expecting that language would shield her from consequence. But she hesitated. The waitress had already anticipated this possibility and maintained eye contact, conveying that the words would not have the intended effect. The calmness in her demeanor spoke volumes, demonstrating that subtle arrogance would not work here. The waitress continued, her tone soft but assertive. I know that sometimes frustrations can come through in our words, even if they are not meant to be. I also know that a respectful conversation benefits everyone, including your own experience here. I hope we can move forward with understanding and courtesy. She spoke with an air of quiet diplomacy, framing her response not as confrontation but as an invitation to mutual respect. Her words were carefully chosen, demonstrating emotional intelligence and social awareness. It was a skill honed through years of interacting with diverse patrons, many of whom carried their own challenges and expectations. The wealthy woman shifted slightly in her chair, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her face. Her usual confidence wavered because she had underestimated the power of composure. Her subtle attempt to belittle had been met not with humiliation or embarrassment but with a calm and respectful assertion of boundaries. There was no grand show, no loud declaration of superiority, only a quiet demonstration that control could exist without aggression. Other patrons, noticing the change, felt a quiet admiration for the waitress. It was clear she was not only handling the situation with grace but also subtly teaching a lesson in dignity and poise. Some exchanged glances, almost as if acknowledging that they were witnessing a small but meaningful victory of character over arrogance. It was a display of human strength that did not need to be loud or dramatic to leave an impression. The waitress offered a slight smile, maintaining eye contact without being intimidating. Your experience here is important to us, she continued. I want to ensure that everything meets your expectations. At the same time, I also hope that every interaction remains courteous. That way, everyone can enjoy their time here. Her words were simple, yet their impact was profound. The wealthy woman's attempt to assert dominance had been quietly neutralized by a combination of calmness, clarity, and professionalism. The wealthy woman opened her mouth, perhaps to reply, but the words that came out were softer than she had intended. She realized that her usual tactics, subtle insults, arrogance, and expectations of compliance, would not yield the desired outcome here. The waitress's calm presence had reframed the encounter entirely. It was no longer a contest of power in the traditional sense. It was a demonstration of strength through composure. The waitress's colleagues, who had been observing from a distance, felt a quiet sense of pride. They had seen countless difficult patrons, but this interaction highlighted a rare combination of empathy, patience, and assertiveness. She had not allowed the situation to escalate, nor had she let the insult linger unchallenged. Instead, she had turned the moment into a demonstration of professionalism and self-respect. As she stepped back slightly, giving the wealthy woman space, she maintained a steady and composed demeanor. Her body language, soft yet confident, communicated that the conversation had reached a point where mutual understanding was possible. There was no need for loud words or dramatic gestures. The strength of calm authority was sufficient. The wealthy woman, now confronted with the reality that her usual methods would not work, shifted her posture. The slight smirk she had worn earlier was gone, replaced by a tentative acknowledgement of the situation. She sipped her coffee more slowly, her eyes occasionally meeting the waitress's with a mixture of surprise and a begrudging respect. For the first time that morning, she was aware that her wealth and status did not automatically grant her dominance over every interaction. The subtle shift in power was almost invisible to anyone not paying close attention, yet it was unmistakable to those who were present. The waitress had not raised her voice, had not created a scene, and yet she had established a firm boundary and conveyed her dignity. This quiet display of strength carried more weight than any argument or insult could have. It was a demonstration of emotional intelligence in action, a lesson in handling challenging situations with grace and confidence. The cafe continued to hum with its usual sounds, but the air around the window table was different now. There was a recognition that a quiet resolution had been reached, that a display of calm assertiveness could reshape the interaction entirely. Patrons continued their morning routines, but those watching could feel the subtle influence of the exchange. The wealthy woman, though still seated, had lost the upper hand she had assumed she held at the beginning of the visit. The waitress returned to her station, her movements smooth and purposeful. She checked on other patrons, refilled drinks, and straightened tables, all while maintaining an awareness of the window table. She understood that the situation was not over, but she had established a clear precedent. Disrespect would not be met with submission, but with calm, firm professionalism. The wealthy woman, observing quietly, could do little but acknowledge the competence and poise she had encountered. By the time the next set of patrons arrived, the tension had eased slightly, but the lesson remained. The wealthy woman, for all her experience and expectation of control, had been met with a response she had not anticipated. The waitress had demonstrated that true authority does not always come from wealth, status, or intimidation, but from the quiet strength of self-respect, composure, and clear communication. The morning continued, and the cafe returned to its familiar rhythm. Patrons enjoyed their drinks and pastries, staff moved efficiently, and the sunlight shifted across the tables. Yet, the encounter at the window table left a lingering impression. The waitress's calm, respectful, and assertive approach had transformed a potential humiliation into a moment of quiet triumph. It was a reminder that dignity, patience, and clarity of purpose could overcome arrogance and expectation without the need for confrontation. As the wealthy woman continued her visit, she remained quieter than before, sipping her coffee thoughtfully. The waitress, attentive yet composed, ensured that her remaining needs were met with professionalism. Every gesture, every word, reinforced the quiet authority that had already reshaped the interaction. The patrons who observed could sense the shift, understanding that what they had witnessed was a display of human strength, grace, and the power of a calm and confident response. By mid-morning, it was clear that the waitress had successfully navigated one of the most challenging situations of her day. Her response had been measured, respectful, and effective, ensuring that the wealthy woman's presence no longer carried the weight of intimidation. The cafe continued its rhythm, but the subtle victory of composure over arrogance had left an indelible mark, a testament to the power of human dignity and calm determination in the face of rudeness. The cafe continued to buzz with its usual morning energy, yet the air around the window table had changed. The wealthy woman, who had come in expecting to assert her control and belittle those around her, now sat more quietly than she had before. The subtle victory of the waitress's calm composure had shifted the dynamic completely. Patrons nearby could sense it, some glancing at the table with curiosity, others with quiet approval of the way the situation had been handled. The waitress moved gracefully among the tables, her demeanor professional and steady. Each step, each gesture, reinforced the sense that she had handled the situation not with anger, but with dignity. The staff, who had watched the exchange unfold from a distance, felt a quiet sense of pride. They knew that such interactions could be challenging, that patrons who felt entitled often tried to intimidate, but the waitress had managed the encounter with a rare blend of poise, clarity, and patience. The wealthy woman stirred her coffee absent-mindedly, her eyes flicking occasionally to the waitress as she worked. It was clear that she was reflecting on the encounter, perhaps realizing that her usual methods of asserting dominance would not succeed in this setting. There was a subtle tension in her posture, a shift from confidence to cautious observation. The power she had assumed she held over the interaction had quietly slipped away. Other diners began to notice more than just the wealthy woman's presence. They sensed the change in energy, the quiet assertion of boundaries that had occurred without drama. Some exchanged discreet glances, recognizing the understated strength displayed by the waitress. It was not loud or theatrical, but its impact was undeniable. The waitress had turned a moment that could have been humiliating into a display of competence, composure, and human dignity. As the morning moved forward, the wealthy woman began to speak less. Her attempts to subtly dominate the situation, to belittle or undermine, had been met with unwavering calm. She realized that her behavior, which had so often yielded results elsewhere, was ineffective here. Each movement, each gesture she had relied on to assert her authority, now seemed inconsequential in comparison to the quiet strength of the waitress. The waitress continued to attend to other patrons, maintaining her warm smile and attentive service. She moved with purpose, ensuring that every guest felt valued, that their orders were correct, and that the atmosphere remained pleasant. Yet, she kept an eye on the window table, aware that the wealthy woman was watching and that the dynamic was still delicate. There was no rush, no need for confrontation. Her calm presence spoke volumes and set the tone for the rest of the cafe. Gradually, the wealthy woman's attention shifted away from trying to control the situation and more toward simply observing. Her initial sense of superiority had been tempered by a quiet recognition of the waitress's competence. She sipped her coffee slowly, occasionally glancing around the cafe as if measuring the reactions of others. Some patrons looked toward her briefly, noticing the subtle change in her demeanor, a softening of arrogance into reflection. The waitress sensed this shift and adjusted her approach accordingly. She remained polite and professional, yet there was a quiet assertiveness in the way she carried herself. Each interaction she had with the other patrons reinforced her calm authority, demonstrating that she could maintain respect and control without hostility. Her ability to navigate the delicate balance of service and personal dignity had created a ripple effect, subtly influencing the atmosphere of the cafe as a whole. Staff members moved around with renewed confidence, knowing that they were part of a team capable of handling difficult situations with grace. The display of composure by the waitress served as an example, a lesson in professionalism that could not be taught in words alone. It was something tangible, something observed and absorbed by those who worked alongside her. The cafe environment itself seemed to respond to this energy, a subtle but noticeable lift in mood and attentiveness. The wealthy woman, now quietly drinking her coffee, began to notice the respect the waitress had earned from others. She could sense the approval of the patrons, the way the staff had been emboldened, and she understood, perhaps for the first time, that her wealth and status were not enough to demand respect. Respect had to be earned, and it could be displayed through calm confidence and integrity rather than through intimidation. The waitress moved closer to the window table at one point, refilling the woman's coffee with gentle efficiency. Her presence was calm, her smile reassuring yet confident. She did not need to speak harshly or assert dominance. The strength of her composure had already made its mark. The wealthy woman noticed this, her posture softening slightly as she realized that her earlier attempts to humiliate had failed. The cafe continued its steady rhythm, with new patrons arriving and the staff moving smoothly between tables. The exchange at the window table remained a quiet focal point, a lesson in subtle influence and the power of calm authority. Patrons who witnessed it, whether closely or peripherally, could sense that something significant had occurred. It was a reminder that dignity and composure could shift dynamics in ways that arrogance and condescension never could. As the wealthy woman prepared to leave, she did so with a subdued awareness of the encounter. There was no dramatic exit, no show of defiance, only a quiet acknowledgement that the morning had unfolded differently than she had expected. The waitress, continuing her duties, maintained the same calm, professional presence that had defined the encounter from the start. Her actions had spoken louder than any words could, leaving a lasting impression on both the wealthy woman and those who had observed. In the aftermath, the staff gathered briefly, exchanging quiet nods and smiles. They understood the significance of what had occurred, the subtle triumph of professionalism, patience, and composure over arrogance. The cafe had returned to its normal rhythm, yet the lesson remained, a testament to the power of calm authority and the importance of maintaining dignity in all interactions. The wealthy woman left the cafe, her demeanor changed, a quiet reflection replacing the arrogance she had carried in. The patrons returned to their conversations, the staff to their tasks, and the waitress continued her day with steady focus and calm. The The morning had tested patience and composure, but it had also revealed the quiet strength that comes from responding to challenges with dignity, empathy, and unwavering professionalism. It was a moment that would linger in the memories of those present. A subtle but profound lesson in human interaction, respect, and the power of maintaining one's poise in the face of rudeness. The cafe had returned to its familiar rhythm, the usual hum of conversation and soft clatter of cups filling the space. Yet the events of the morning had left an invisible mark, a subtle change that lingered in the atmosphere. Patrons who had witnessed the encounter at the window table carried with them a quiet sense of respect for what had unfolded. It was a reminder that dignity and composure could shape the course of any interaction. The wealthy woman remained at her table, finishing her coffee slowly. Her earlier sense of superiority had diminished, replaced by a mixture of reflection and unease. She had come in expecting to assert control, to belittle, and to leave with the satisfaction of having dominated the interaction. Instead, she found herself confronted with a calm, composed, and confident response that she could not undermine. Her attempts to humiliate the waitress had quietly failed. The waitress continued her duties with her usual grace and attentiveness. She moved among the tables, refilling drinks, clearing plates, and ensuring that every patron felt attended to. There was no outward display of triumph, no smirk of victory, just a steady, professional presence that communicated competence and dignity. Her calmness had shifted the energy in the cafe, and she maintained it effortlessly, aware of the influence her poise carried. As the morning progressed, the wealthy woman finally stood to leave. She gathered her coat and bag, her movements slightly slower, almost thoughtful. She approached the door and paused for a brief moment, glancing at the waitress. There was a faint, almost imperceptible acknowledgement in her eyes, a recognition that the encounter had not gone as she had planned. It was not an apology, nor a statement of defeat, but a silent concession to the composure and quiet authority she had encountered. The waitress watched her leave with the same calm attention she had maintained throughout the morning. She did not rush to assert dominance or deliver a final word. Her presence and actions had already spoken more effectively than any confrontation could have. The wealthy woman departed, leaving behind a cafe atmosphere that felt lighter, warmer, and more respectful. The patrons who had observed the interaction carried with them a sense of the power of calm professionalism, a lesson in handling difficult situations with dignity. Once the door closed behind the wealthy woman, the staff exchanged quiet smiles. They had seen countless challenging patrons, but this encounter had been different. It had highlighted the subtle strength that comes from remaining composed, responding with clarity, and maintaining dignity under pressure. The waitress's approach had demonstrated that true authority does not require aggression or confrontation. It can be expressed through calmness, empathy, and professionalism. The cafe continued its rhythm, yet the energy was subtly changed. Patrons who had not directly witnessed the exchange could sense that something significant had occurred. The way the staff moved, the attentiveness of the waitress, and the atmosphere of calm authority created a new standard for the environment. The moment had left a lasting impression, a quiet testament to the power of human composure. Later in the morning, the waitress reflected on the encounter. She thought about how easy it could have been to react in anger, to respond to the insult with sharp words, or to allow frustration to dictate her actions. Instead, she had chosen a different path. She had remained calm, confident, and respectful, turning a potentially humiliating moment into an opportunity to assert boundaries and maintain dignity. It was a lesson in emotional intelligence, a reminder of the strength that comes from self-control and awareness. The wealthy woman's departure did not go unnoticed by the remaining patrons. Some of them approached the counter, complimenting the waitress on her professionalism and composure. Their words were genuine, expressing admiration for the way she had handled a challenging situation without conflict. The waitress accepted their compliments with a warm, humble smile, understanding that her calm approach had not only diffused tension but also earned respect. As the day continued, the cafe welcomed more patrons, each interaction smooth and attentive. The staff moved confidently, inspired by the example set earlier. The atmosphere remained calm and pleasant, a reflection of the quiet strength and professionalism displayed by the waitress. It was a reminder that the way challenges are met can have a lasting impact, shaping the environment and influencing the behavior of others. The wealthy woman, meanwhile, continued her day outside the cafe, carrying with her a sense of reflection. Her usual reliance on wealth and status to command respect had been challenged. She realized, perhaps for the first time in that context, that true respect is earned through composure, dignity, and thoughtful interaction, not through intimidation or condescension. The encounter had left a subtle but meaningful impression on her perspective. Back in the cafe, the morning gradually gave way to the afternoon. The routine of service continued, but the memory of the encounter lingered. Patrons spoke quietly about the morning, sharing impressions of the calm and effective way the waitress had handled the situation. The staff carried with them a sense of pride and a reaffirmation of the values of professionalism and respect. The waitress herself moved seamlessly from one task to another, yet she remained aware of the importance of her actions. Every interaction was an opportunity to reinforce the calm, composed authority she had demonstrated. She understood that respect is not demanded through words alone, but is cultivated through consistent, thoughtful behavior. Her presence had quietly reshaped the perception of the cafe environment, setting a standard for both patrons and staff. As the day drew to a close, the cafe continued to buzz with activity. Patrons enjoyed their drinks and meals, conversations flowed, and the staff maintained their attentive service. The incident with the wealthy woman had become a part of the morning's story, a quiet demonstration of the impact of calm authority. It was a lesson in human interaction, a reminder that dignity, composure, and respect can influence outcomes more profoundly than aggression or entitlement. The waitress reflected on the encounter one last time that evening. She thought about the subtle power of calm responses, the way composure could disarm arrogance, and how professionalism could turn a challenging situation into a moment of quiet triumph. She understood that such moments, though small, could leave a lasting impression, shaping the way people perceive and interact with one another. The wealthy woman's visit, though brief, had become a defining moment in the cafe's morning. It was a reminder that patience, empathy, and thoughtful action could overcome arrogance and entitlement. The waitress had demonstrated that responding with dignity and calm authority was not only effective but transformative, influencing the atmosphere, the patrons, and even the challenging individual herself. As the cafe closed for the day, the staff cleaned and prepared for the next morning. The memory of the morning's events lingered, a quiet testament to the power of composure and professionalism. The waitress, standing briefly at the counter, allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. She had handled a difficult situation with grace, leaving a lasting impression not only on the wealthy woman, but on everyone who had witnessed the encounter. In the end, the story of the morning was one of quiet strength. It was not about confrontation or humiliation, but about the power of human dignity, composure, and respect. The waitress had shown that true authority is expressed through calm confidence, thoughtful action, and unwavering professionalism. Her actions had transformed a potentially negative encounter into a meaningful display of human strength, leaving a subtle but enduring impact on all who were present. It was a story that would remain in the memory of the cafe, a reminder that grace and composure often speak louder than arrogance and entitlement.